Well, here we are, guys. We are finally in the release week of Metroid Dread, otherwise known as Metroid 5. It has been quite a journey, and definitely, I think I could say a struggle for a lot of us Metroid fans to get to Metroid Dread, to finally see a Metroid Part 5 in the 2D saga of the Metroid games actually be releasing, coming out on the Switch, the first official HD Metroid game we've ever seen. So many cool things going on here. We're gonna finally find out what happens after Metroid Fusion, you know, the farthest in the timeline we will be in 19 years, which is very, very crazy to think. And while we're in this release week, just a couple of days away from actually being able to play this game, I thought it would be fun to kind of revisit the entire franchise in kind of a fun way. And I want to do an insane task, and in one video, I want to do a quick fire review, and I mean quick, of every single Metroid game that is ever released. Now, around 2 years ago, I did make a video where I ranked every single existing Metroid game with the exception of the Prime Trilogy, and that was a ton of fun. I got a great response. That is a video that still gets views and comments to this day, which I'm really happy with and proud of, because I haven't had too many videos that sort of have that evergreen sort of quality to it, you know, on my channel. I've just never seen that kind of success. And I think that that's really cool, and I appreciate you guys for liking it. It was a ton of fun to do. It was very hard, but it was hard in the fun way, right? Of like, I'm just going to rank every game in my favorite series of all time. And so that was cool. And so I wanted to take that concept and kind of spin it on its head, like I said, to celebrate the release week of Metroid Dread. This is going to be pretty crazy, but I think I've kind of organized in my head how I feel and the number rank I'm going to give every single game as I give you, you know, 30 to 40 seconds or whatever of a quick review of every single game, including the Prime Trilogy that is ever released in the Metroid franchise, because I am that excited for Metroid Dread. So, with all of that preamble out of the way, let's just go ahead and jump in to reviewing every single Metroid game in release order in the franchise. Naturally, we start off with the original Metroid released on the NES in 1986. And what can I say, man? I'm an older guy. You guys know I grew up in the 80s playing on the NES, which means my first experience with Metroid was the original game on the 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. And at the time, as a very young kid, I loved it. It was eerie, it was creepy, it was mysterious, and of course, it contained the amazing reveal that this character you were playing as, Samus, wasn't a dude, it wasn't a robot, it was a girl in a video game. It was actually a possible thing. And of course, I lived through the schoolyard talk about the Justin Bailey Code and being able to play as Samus in a bikini and all of these fun things. It was crazy, it was great, it was a fun, exciting time to be a kid playing video games. Metroid was the neatest thing around. I loved it to death. So yeah, Metroid, it's a great game. I'm gonna give it an 8.5. Metroid 2, The Return of Samus, released on the Game Boy, is admittedly the Metroid game I probably have the least amount of time with, and I also will admit, it's a Metroid game I actually have not completed. However, I did spend quite a bit of time with it as a kid, playing it on my friend's Game Boy, and then I also revisited it when it released on the Nintendo 3DS eShop a couple of years ago. In hindsight, it's a little bit clunky. I think that Samus's character model takes up too much of the screen, and it does suffer from not having a map system and being really easy to get lost, which is also what the first game had, to be fair. However, especially for the time, it had great graphics. It was exciting to see the Metroid series continue as we were all kids, playing it portably. It's got some of the best music in the franchise, and it's still Metroid, man. It's a fun time, so I'm gonna say Metroid 2, that's a 7.5. Super Metroid, released on the Super Nintendo in 1994. What do you even say about Super Metroid anymore? It's amazing, you know, they took the Metroid formula, they put it into 16-bit, they added a map system, they gave us more upgrades than we'd ever seen, and they created a very complex, tangled web of a game to play through with incredible bosses and amazing graphics and music. This game smokes, you guys. Absolutely phenomenal. Deserves its reputation. It's not quite my favorite Metroid game, which is a little bit controversial to some. However, This game is a masterpiece, and it's timeless. It holds up to this day. To me, Super Metroid rocks. I'm gonna say 9.5. And here we are, early on in this list, and we already come to the Big Daddy, Metroid Prime, released in 2002 on the Nintendo GameCube. You guys know, my #1 favorite video game of all time. This is a cheat for me, but it's a cheat that I love to talk about. I don't want to waste your time with this game because you know how I feel. This game blew my mind. It stuck with me for years, and it took me a couple of years to realize it was my favorite game of all time. But when I thought back on it, when I went back and played it for a second time, you know, going back to the early 2000s here, I realized this game, the graphics, the music, the exploration, the gameplay, Samus herself, the incredible bosses, the amazing final boss, everything about this game, to me, is utter gaming perfection, and it'll be no surprise when I tell you, to me, Metroid Prime, that's a 10 out of 10. Metroid Fusion, otherwise known as Metroid 4, releasing also in 2002 on the Game Boy Advance. This is a huge fan favorite, and to me, it is a game that is 2D Metroid gaming perfection. Now, I will admit, many people hold this as one of the greatest games of all time, maybe even their favorite Metroid game of all time, and it's worthy of that title. This game is phenomenal, but it's not the highest on my personal list of Metroid games. It is very high, but I don't quite think it reaches the 2D perfection of one or two other Metroid games. Obviously, one of them we've already discussed in Super Metroid. However, the story of Samus and the X-Parasite and the SAX entity hunting her, everything she goes through on the BSL, meeting the AI computer, referring to it as Adam, finally getting some kind of narrative and glimpse into Samus and her history as a person and as a bounty hunter. Very cool. They really started to spin a strong narrative in the 2D space with Metroid Fusion, and it deserves great credit for that. Not my favorite boss battles. That's one of the things that holds it back just a smidge for me. But overall, this game is phenomenal. It's great 2D Metroid, so for me, Metroid Fusion, that's an 8.75. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, released in 2004 on the Nintendo GameCube, the first sequel to my all-time favorite video game. You guys, this will be a controversial take, but I love this game. I think Echoes is almost a perfect game. It is obscenely hard. The GameCube release, not the trilogy re-release where they did, you know, confirm that they made that game a bit easier, but the original GameCube release, holy crap, I will never play through it on Veteran again. One time was all I needed. They did do the typical kind of trademark Nintendo Light World, Dark World thing here, but I loved it. I loved adding the ammo system, the light and dark ammo, the inclusion and introduction of Dark Samus, like my favorite enemy of all time. This game is phenomenal, very complex, very difficult, but a ton of fun, beautiful graphics. This game is amazing. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, that's a 9.5. Metroid Zero Mission, the first remake on this list, released in 2004 on the Game Boy Advance, is an amazing remake of the original NES Metroid game. And you guys, I'm just going to tell you, this happens to be my favorite 2D Metroid game. Yes, even over Super Metroid, I think it's that good. It was so cool to see the original game, which I knew so well from my childhood, rebuilt with modern kind of Super Nintendo graphics. They even added an epilogue adventure where you actually played the game as Zero Suit Samus. And they even infused some Chozo elements into the story and the narrative and the visuals. This game is just, it's great. It's very short and it is very easy, so I can see why some people don't like it for that reason. But I actually think it works for this game. I love Zero Mission. It's everything I want out of a 2D Metroid game. To me, Metroid Zero Mission, that's a 9.5. Metroid Prime Pinball, released on the Nintendo DS in 2005, is a weird, quirky spin-off game. It is one of a kind. It is exactly what it seems like. It is a retelling of the original Metroid Prime game, only in pinball form, and taking advantage of the Nintendo DS's two screens. I mean, it's a weird game to talk about. It's a weird idea, but surprisingly, it actually worked really well. Is this a great game? No, it's not a great game. Is it essential to your Metroid experience? No, definitely not. But this game kind of does survive on charm alone, and it does work as a pinball game. It's really fun, and it looks and sounds like Metroid. I think it's a cool idea. Not the greatest game, but still a lot of fun. Metroid Prime Pinball, that's a 7.5. Metroid Prime Hunters, also released on the Nintendo DS in 2006, is a pretty awesome take on the 3D first-person Metroid kind of gameplay experience, but on the very impressive Nintendo DS hardware when it released. And it also boasted a really cool online multiplayer competitive component, which was a crazy thing to see for a portable game in a Metroid game that's 3D on the DS. It was weird. The campaign is what I prefer. It does have a repeating boss structure, which annoyed me, but it was still very cool, very fun to play a cool Metroid Prime experience in my hand. The online stuff was very difficult to me, but it was a ton of fun. Introduced a bunch of bounty hunters. It was a cool, quirky idea. So I say Metroid Prime Hunters, that's an 8. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, released in 2007 on the Nintendo Wii, I will admit is my least favorite of the Metroid Prime trilogy, but make no mistake, this game rules. It has the best graphics. I loved the introduction of bloom lighting into the kind of tech and the visual style of the Metroid Prime name. I think the PED suit is the coolest looking suit she wears in any of the Prime games. And I really liked that they tried to humanize Samus a little bit by taking the Phazon sort of entity that is a huge part of the story in the Prime trilogy and actually infecting her with it. And it's pretty neat what happens to Samus throughout that game simply because of this one choice. The gameplay is great. It introduced motion controls. I don't love the final boss, but having Dark Samus as a part of a final game was really cool, and Skytown on Elysia alone makes the adventure worth it. To me, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, that's a 9.25. The Metroid Prime trilogy, released in 2009 on the Nintendo Wii? How do we live in a world where this amazing collection exists? I don't know the answer, but we do live in that world, and I love that we do. Not much to say about that. You take 3 of my favorite games of all time, you put them in one collection in a beautiful steelbook, you add motion controls to all of the games. This is perfect. This game is a cheat win for all time. Metroid Prime Trilogy? That's a Googleplex out of 10. Metroid Other M, released in 2010 on the Nintendo Wii. And yeah, we're going to step into the controversy real quick here, guys, because man, this game is so divisive, and it honestly breaks my heart that it's so divisive, and it breaks my heart that so many people can't see this game for the vision it tried to create, and all of the good things it does do. I've talked about at length to you guys about how I can acknowledge there are a lot of things that don't quite work in this game. They tried to do some weird things, and not all of them succeed. Absolutely, it's not the best Metroid game. Is it better than most people say, though? Absolutely. The gameplay, the graphics, the story, I will defend, the story is very good, even if it is a repeat in many ways of some of the beats in Metroid Fusion. It's a good story, and it tells an interesting part of Samus's journey, and we get a lot of backstory. I admire and appreciate and respect the attempt to tell a deep narrative in 2010 on the Wii with Metroid Other M. It is a flawed game, but it is a good game. Metroid Other M, that's an 8.5 out of 10. That's right, I said it. Metroid Other M is an 8.5. Metroid Prime Federation Force, released in 2016 on the Nintendo 3DS. This is a weird one, you guys, and I've always enjoyed conversations about this game because it's a very hated game. It's a very polarizing game. Most of us, myself included, were not happy when it was first revealed. However, I will say, when everything came to release and I actually played the game once it was officially in my hands on my 3DS, I can't lie. It's a fun game. It is focused on multiplayer and competitive and cooperative, and you don't play as Samus. You got these weird chibi Federation Force kind of just characters shooting and solving puzzles. It's a weird spin-off game, but it's not really a bad game. It looks beautiful, it sounds amazing, and it plays like a Metroid Prime game, even though you're not Samus, which is unfortunate. So there are some issues here. I don't love the overall game design, but is the gameplay fun? And again, good graphics, good music? Yeah, it has those things. So to me, Metroid Prime Federation Force, that's a 7. Metroid Samus Returns, released in 2017 on the Nintendo 3DS, the final game on this list, the most recent Metroid game. And yeah, I love this game. This was Mercury Steam's first Metroid game. They're about to release Metroid Dread upon the world. We're all very excited. This game laid the template for what we're going to play in Metroid Dread. It's a remake and a retelling of Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. And I don't know. I know that not everyone thinks this game is all that hot, but I kind of do, you guys. I'm a sucker for Metroid Samus Returns, you guys. I think this game was rebuilt in such a way that it almost feels like an entirely new Metroid game. To me, that means and says a lot. I give it a lot of respect for that reason. I had a ton of fun with this game. I think it looks beautiful. I think it sounds fantastic. Metroid Samus Returns, that's a 9. So that's every Metroid game. That's my quick-fire review and quick-fire scores. What a ton of fun this was to do. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. And now we are days away from Metroid Dread, and we are who knows how far away from Metroid Prime 4. We have these two fantastic and exciting Metroid games on the horizon. We are finally living in the good timeline for Metroid, you guys, and it feels great. I will obviously be talking about Metroid Dread as I start to get some hands-on time with it. We're all very excited. I can't believe it. So like I said, I hope you enjoyed this. Share your thoughts on my reviews, your own reviews. Yell at me about Metroid Other M all you want. I do not care because I love that game. And that being said, yeah, this was a ton of fun. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. I will catch you guys in another video after we've all played Metroid Dread. Bye-bye.